Hello, my astrology friends. This is Lada from astrolada.com. A day before the elections here with financial astrologer Sama. Hello, Sama.
Hello, Lada. Hello, everyone.
I'm very excited what you have to say about the markets. The name of the video is End 2024 Profitably. And how can we know? We don't even know the elections result yet.
Yeah, well, there's certain things in play that continue to push forward whether we like it or not. And that's how these general cycles and trends work. That's why we here are fans of astrology, why we love you and your channel and all the different perspectives that the astrologers provide. And there's different ways that we can look at charts to see how these cycles are going to play out. And different perspectives allow us to look at different viewpoints that can give us an alignment that helps make sense of things in a way that is very holistic. So one of the techniques I used the last time I was on was looking at a quarterly chart for Wall Street, for example, right? So the last time I was on as well, I talked about the Saturn Jupiter square and how that would cause a low in the middle of August, and how September's astrology, including the eclipses, would retrigger the war drums and cause another low in markets. So the blend of how things happen on the mundane astrology side in the very real world obviously then has a reflection on the markets. Why? Who are the market participants? They're the human beings who things are happening to. So what was happening to us in the real world then ends up reflected in price and in markets and how people choose to invest. So I also talked about how those lows would be the result of people worrying about the US economy and issues with the US military because of what we saw in America's Sibley chart. There were activations in the sixth house. The sixth house rules debts, employees, relations to how we are of service. Any chart sixth house component is going to be a bit of a struggle. That's one of the houses of difficulty in Vedic astrology, right? And we covered a rulership technique in which we saw the ruler of the Wall Street astrological chart for the third quarter, which was Mars at that time, a really bad detriment. And so it was easy to make then the prediction with the confluence of those ideas to see that the market would be going down. A lot of people also then from the fundamental viewpoint of the market were short money. There were issues going on in Japan where they shifted their rates and the market responded very sharply to a shift in the way Japan had been managing money for about 20 to 30 years. It had really surprised a lot of market participants, right? But all that is flushed through now, and markets have been moving up since September because they decided to cut rates due to what they were seeing in the economy related to employment. Employment being, again, the sixth house, right? And so that's how we're able to see with astrology what sectors of the economy might be an issue or what might be doing well. And then we then see how those narratives then get reflected in the very real world. Issues with the sixth house in America's chart ended up manifesting as jobs reports and unemployment being a concern. And then they cut rates, of course. After the eclipses, I told my premium newsletter this info, which I started to add more detail, the moves that I'm making with my portfolio. So I'm just going to be a little more transparent with you guys. And again, it's not financial advice. I'm just sharing what I'm doing. So those who have been watching know that since about mid-September, since these lows, I've been repositioned in stocks, crypto, 20% in gold and 10 in silver in my main portfolio. And that's something that makes absolute sense to me. And you can get more detail on which stocks, sectors, and ETFs that I like moving forward in 2025 in that yearly financial report, which you can find on Lada's website and on mine. I did it for
I will put
2024.
the link below in the description and a card.
Awesome, awesome. And that would be very useful. So before the August full moon, I had more cash position on the sidelines because Jupiter, the planet of expansion, was free to run for a large part of the summer before it ran into Saturn, Saturn representing more of the opposite polarity of Jupiter in the sense where Saturn is where we have to rest. Right? It's the day where supposedly even God rested and took a break. And so where Saturnian energy is in play, we tend to see things slow down and have to become more efficient. And time is generally up when Saturn's at play, right? So Jupiter's expansion got paused. And then so it made sense to have cash on the sidelines at this point, right? And I was waiting for that pause energy to play out. That's played out. And so therefore, if I don't have money on the sidelines anymore, that means that I think the market is going up. So you might be wondering, well, Mr. Financial Astrologer, which parts of the economy are going up now? So, hey, maybe I don't want to buy your report, or maybe I'm new to this work or new to the world of financial astrology. How can I at least see some results before I decide to buy Samla's reports in the future? 2025 is great. Financial astrology seems great, or maybe I'm not a newsletter subscriber. Or so what about right now, right? So right now, in terms of United States equities, from U.S. stocks, U.S. companies, from my analysis, of course, I like the S&P 500. I like communication services, information technology. Why is that? Jupiter, the gas giant, the planet of expansion, in the sign of Gemini, is very supportive of those sectors. Gemini is an air sign, a changing, mutable air sign. What does that mean? The air component has to do with our intellect. Mercury rules how we search and find for information, how we take in the real world through our five senses. And from a Vedic perspective, Mercury is essentially the prince. It's how we find our way towards the sun, which is maybe a little bit off topic here, but Mercury has a lot to do with technology, communication, and markets, okay? And so Jupiter expanding that energy means that those sectors are going to be very supported in terms of the flow of money into them, okay? And Uranus is also going to then revisit the places that Jupiter has blessed upon its path. Uranus is also a revolutionary technological energy. It's very much related to things like crypto, the internet, revolutions, the French Revolution, industrial revolutions, and of course our coming AI tech revolution as well. So those sectors are going to be very well supported over the next several years. Financial stocks look good. Consumer staples, industrials look good to me. Energy is neutral, slightly up, not as bullish anymore since Jupiter left the sign of Taurus. Why is that? Taurus is a second house energy. The second house is right under the first house of the ascendant, which is the body and the life path, the actual physical vehicle of whatever chart we're looking at. The second house then is the energy source, which includes money, our original family, our upbringing, our money. And so Taurus is going to be related to things like currency, and it's an earth sign, physical earth. So things that are dug up out of the earth, like metals, like gold, which is why 3 years ago I was able to make a very easy prediction that gold would be at all-time highs when Jupiter, the planet of expansion, would be in the sign of Taurus. And then we saw that to be true, right? So now that Jupiter has left the sign of Taurus, that energy is not being expanded in the energy sector as much for now. The energy sector will go on to expand throughout the latter end of the decade, which I've talked about in other videos. But for now, I'm going to just continue forward because there's a lot to cover, and I know you got election videos to cover with other astrologers as well. So healthcare stocks are okay to me. They aren't the biggest opportunity to make money right now. But as we get into 2027, biotechnology stocks might be in position to go crazy for a few years. So there's that. If you're into nanotechnology and what Elon's doing, I'm sure governments are. But if you're into that, you can invest in that around 2027 likely. Across the world, Australian companies look strong, Canada, China, and the UK stock markets look like they will do very well. Outside of the United States, Brazil, the Eurozone, India, and Japan, your economies have a little more hurdles, but they'll go all right. They're just not as bullish as the other ones. And then when we talk about fixed income, more stable ways of earning, lower percentages of money, that's information I actually give away for free in my free newsletter, because there's less risk there, generally speaking. So with that, that's more of like government bonds and stuff. I'm not really interested in any government debt except for treasury inflated, protected securities, less than 5 years. I've talked about that for several videos even. I've talked about my position on treasuries and why am I not interested in government debt? Because it's freaking Game of Thrones out there, people. That's why. Which government do you think is gonna win and be on top? No one really knows. So with all this insecurity, why would you invest in government debts? I've talked about this for years. One of the biggest issues humanity has right now, and therefore the economy as a proxy, is dealing with a crisis in the faith of our governments. So if your investment strategy and the plans you have for your life and your family are not taking the instability of our world governments into consideration, you might want to check out my channel. You might want to check out some of Lada's videos about Pluto and Aquarius, and you might want to get more informed because it will affect your life. It will. Not financial advice, astrological advice. Moving on. So globally, investing in agriculture is okay. Investing in metals and Bitcoin, if you've watched my stuff, you know I'm very bullish on both of those. Global commodities and oil are okay. You know, just so you know, when I say okay, I'm saying more neutral to slightly bullish. Not the biggest opportunities to make money, but they'll be okay. Uranium is okay for now, but full disclosure, I have been and will continue to accumulate positions in uranium. I'll explain more in my 2025 yearly report, but uranium is definitely a Pluto and Aquarius era type trade worth paying attention to. Now, with me, I see AI is obvious, but you also want to pay attention to semiconductors, which is why NVIDIA is in part doing so well, and uranium during this Pluto and Aquarius era. And then the other global currencies, I don't talk about them much because Bitcoin, gold, and the US dollar are the kings of the show. I don't think there's really much to talk about in Forex other than that. If I didn't live in the United States, those are the currency assets I would be chasing. And when I travel the world, that is exactly what I see. You know, yes, I'm an American, and yes, many of you have heard me complain about my country over the past couple of years of being on this channel. But when it comes to currency, there's really nothing like being anywhere in the world and being able to receive service in exchange for US dollars, even when you don't speak the same language. You know, you can kind of do it with gold and Bitcoin, but it's just not the same. Bitcoin was supposed to solve the problems of carrying around a bunch of gold, but man, the CIA and names that I won't name because it'll bother the performance of the video, they've done a really good job at making sure that the dollar is still king. So anyway,
So,
as far as the other currencies are
question. So
concerned,
you
yeah, go ahead.
don't see like a
Question.
big crash of the dollar coming in the next 2, 3 months, 4 months?
You see all kinds of videos and stuff talking about that, but it's because people don't really understand the global economy. The United States has to ultimately be dethroned for there to really be a change in what happens to the dollar. Because at the end of the day, on the first of the month, your bills are due in dollars. Until that changes, the game is the same. Your rent is due in dollars, and all these other global economies that have their debts are issued in dollars as well. So until that changes, you still need dollars. Period. So
Uh,
that's why
is
this
some
whole
big financial
global.
crisis overall like happening? Like their predictions, like if
Well,
the
see, that's the thing. That's the thing is this is why I've also been talking so much about civil unrest because this can only go on until the people eventually say, Jesus, there's no opportunity left. The wealthy have squeezed so much out of the system. There's literally nothing left. We're going to revolt. And that's always how it ends up ending and then reshifting.
Mhm.
So until we get to that point, the game is the same.
And do you see that point astrologically somewhere when it escalates?
Yes, yes, and that's where people can actually we check out the interview we did called the Climate Change Wars, where I give this date around 2031 to 2033 really being a period of reset globally in terms of how we look at markets and potentially even the United States position in the world, where more power and wealth actually starts to actually by the time Pluto leaves Aquarius, starts to shift to Eastern countries in the world. So that's a huge topic, and I'll continue to talk more about that as the years go on, because I think it's fascinating how astrology and the markets kind of reveal this being the likely outcome for the future. But it's a huge topic, you know.
So the big financial crisis is still away. We
Yeah,
have like
like,
20. It pretty much coincides to 100 years ago, the Big Depression, which was started at 1929, 30, and you see it around us. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Good.
Yep.
That
So
no, we have a few more years. Grow gardens and food or whatever.
grow gardens, absolutely. Yeah, we're basically going through a very Plutonian Aquarian shift in how we live life. You've discussed this. A lot of astrologers have discussed this. And so, what does that mean when things become more technological? What does it mean when we have a smaller population? What does it mean when things are more AI driven and power is actually shifting from big government and big corporations to smaller businesses who are more efficient and maybe even more democratic and more humanitarian? How do we deal with more invasive technology and in a way that could even be beneficial, identifying diseases ahead of time, data that can make us be healthier and live longer, and maybe unfortunately even make some Saturnian people who have a lot of power live even longer, and how do we deal with those dynamics? And so that's the shift we're heading into. Some of it can be really positive. Like social media, this channel, this video would not be possible without internet. And so, and YouTube and these giants on, there's still some of that Capricornian flavor that these giants have to wear. Oh, you don't like these government videos? Get rid of the dislike button. Don't talk about the election, So we're still dealing with some of that Capricornian power, but ultimately we have seen a horizontal shift of power allowing conversations like this to come through without somebody like you having to go to Hollywood and deal with like a P. Diddy type thing before your program can, be on the air, right? So there's some pluses and minuses to every astrological ingress and shift of energy. And we talk about the pluses and the minuses so that you guys can be aware and really follow your North Node purpose to your sun. I mean, that's why I do this. That's why I talk to you guys about this. Not to scare anybody, not to get anybody excited, but it's more about you're having a life experience and then your vehicle's going to expire. So what are you going to do with that? That's ultimately your biggest problem. I'm just here to help you a little bit financially and with your life purpose. That's
I'm
all.
glad that you're not sounding this apocalyptic. You're giving the good perspective of, yeah, Pluto in Aquarius. Look at the shift of power more horizontally, like you say. And
Mhm.
because a lot of, I would say just astrologers, many people, they just want this sensationalism to scare people.
Yeah.
But thank you for giving us both perspective in a balanced way.
Yeah. It's I think it's just the knee-jerk reaction that the ego has. It wants to survive, and therefore
Mhm.
it wants to hear good news, and it will naturally run away from bad news. And we are all very, emotions are something we feel very viscerally. They grip us. And so who wants to feel negative emotions? And so that can very much be associated with the messenger or with astrology. But if you look back at your life, we've all experienced highs and lows. I mean, what else is it? How else does life work? I mean, so get over it, guys. There's going to be news that's not always good, and there's going to be news that's good, and then, and, life just continues to go on that way. It's fine. You'll be fine. So, let's did I talk about all the current? I talked about Bitcoin. I think I talked about the other currencies. Yeah, the pound and the Swiss franc will be okay. The Canadian dollar, the Australian dollar, the euro, and the yen don't really look that good.
Do
Really
you
look that good.
check charts for those
Absolutely.
currencies? So you
Absolutely.
know the chart of each currency?
Mhm. Yep.
Oh.
I have natal charts for everything that I mentioned, and I also look at the technical price charts as well. Those lines and candlesticks and all that crazy stuff. I look at that as well. Yeah. So on the astrology side of things, November is an interesting month. There's really two kinds of outcomes I see here. Um, those of you who know, like I mentioned earlier, with the Fed cutting rates in September, that means the price of money is cheaper than it has been, which allows then governments and entities that borrow money to get money at a cheaper price. Why did they do that and why is that important? Well, the price of money really since the previous high-end markets at the end of 2021, the interest rates have made the price of money very high, which means then the debts that are owed every year have become a lot more expensive over the past 2 or 3 years. Why is that a problem? Well, governments don't earn money the way you and I do, like like normal people do. They don't just go to work and offer you value in exchange for income. They don't run businesses. I mean, they do invest to a degree, but other than that, they are the people that issue currency. And so that's why you get phrases like give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. It's ultimately their money. And so they print it when they need more. And so the debts that they owe, like the US government or other governments, they've made the price of money cheaper because over the past couple of years, the debts that they owed have become very expensive. And so I know that sounds ridiculous of almost like, but what's the point of that? And that's where, this is where this is not just astrology I'm talking about here. It's real world information of how this is a ridiculous Ponzi scheme, really, at the end of the day. And so this is why things like gold and silver are actually going to go up in price, and a lot of asset prices are going to go up in price because the price of money being cheaper helps them actually pay off the debts that they made more expensive over the past couple of years. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's what we're dealing with, people, is they've essentially cut rates to make the expensive debts that they owe cheaper to pay off in the future. So what does that do? That adds more money into the system. That money going into the system then is going to chase assets like your Teslas, your whatever, the S&P 500 essentially, and basically all the different assets across the world. And so part of what I do then is help you guys determine, well, when is that going to happen and which assets are going to benefit best from financial astrology. So that's part of the game. And that's what I offer as a benefit to you guys, is understanding what the game is and how to position yourself. So since money is going to be flowing into asset prices and pushing them up, then is it as easy as just buy now and close your eyes and forget it? Well, it's not that simple. There are shocks and changes to the system that happen, and I help navigate and point out when those are likely to be. And so this leads us to the two outcomes that are likely to happen with the year end. Essentially, the year is likely to end up at a high because there's more money in the system. But at which points might there be some shocks or issues? As you guys know, there is a big contentious United States election coming up. So why don't we look at the astrology of November and see if we can identify when some of those shocks might be. Very simply, for these two outcomes, if things go smoothly, if there's no election issues, then it's very likely that markets progress upward into around December 7th. Why December 7th? Well, what's interesting is that if you were to look at America's chart, Venus is actually moving through the sign of Sagittarius. What is Venus? Venus is good things that come into our lives, the good things that come into a chart. Venus also represents things like women and money and beautiful things that are magnetized towards a chart. Okay. So what's interesting about that is the ascendant of America, Sagittarius, is the sign that Venus is going into, which is the first house, the physical body and the life path. So could that mean that the identity of America is being more feminine or more, let's say, female during the time of the election? Could be. That's one way to look at it. There's other signatures at play. So that's not a Kamala prediction, but it is a factor that America, the ascendant, is becoming more Venusian during the time of the election. As Venus then leaves the sign of Sagittarius, it's going to move through the second house of America, which, as we talked about, ties to power and money and support of the first house. So the economy is likely to do well. The American economy in particular is likely to do well during Venus's transit through the second house as well. And then Venus will eventually leave on December the 7th. So when Venus then leaves the second house, what's the market likely to do? Um, well, I have to keep a little something for my newsletter and reports. That's more enough of a hint there. A buy the dip opportunity may or may not show up on December the 7th. Anyway, Mercury is also going to be retrograding in Sagittarius for a really long time at the end of November, and really it won't leave Sagittarius until the 8th of January. So America could be rethinking the direction it wants to go. It hasn't been going in the best direction, arguably, right? So hopefully this is good news. Now, what might cause things to not go so smoothly, right? Because some of these things that I'm mentioning here are very positive. You know, there's also the fact that as so the things that might cause things not to go smoothly is that the fact that on November the 12th, Mercury will square Saturn. Saturn is going to be going direct on the 15th. But he's moving slowly, he's powerful, he's stationed to go, and the thing about that is so there could be some things from America's past that come up. We have Neptune squaring Venus. So, like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean that Kamala will win or that a female will take America, but then we have a Neptune square. So, this is saying that there's something difficult that needs to be realistically addressed regarding America's homeland and allies due to these placements here. And then during the time of the election, which is now, Venus is in a difficult aspect to Jupiter as well. So that in combination with the fact that I'm sure other astrologers have talked about this, Jupiter is retrograding away from points in Trump's and Kamala's chart. Like it's almost touching certain things, but then it's backing away. It's like, I want to give you no, you're not going to win today kind of an energy where the fact that Jupiter and Venus are also in conflict during this energy too could mean that there's really a mind-changing element happening with the chart of America and the country in some way, shape, or form. So this very much again could look like an election delay or decision or something like that. But
Mhm.
what's good is again, Venus is in the first house, and then also, we know that there's an opposition from Mars to Pluto, but this is also happening in the ninth house of in Leo in America's chart. Okay. And so this is a good placement, the ninth house for America, in the sense that there's actually a trine element going on with not exactly to Mars and Venus, but the two signs are in a friendly relationship to each other. So what's actually happening underneath the surface from an astrological symbolic interpretation is that the country could be trying to figure out what meaningful, dharmic, purposeful direction should it, excuse me, should it pivot in. And so that could be something ultimately that's good for the country. Let's hope. Let's hope, Again, in terms of then this whole delay aspect, Venus is in Sag, so it's could mean that if there is a delay, the legal or the court system could end up favoring the Venusian candidate, or that even whatever happens is still ultimately blessed with Venus's influence here. Okay, but ultimately, America's rethinking its direction, and hopefully, it's good.
So
Hopefully, it's
there's like a lot of people saying, oh, there will be a civil war because no one will win, or one will say they win, the other one will say they win. You don't see
yeah.
this happening for now, do you?
Uh, there's some conflictual. It's a mixed bag. I look at it. I look at the month as mixed energies. I see some of them, as I mentioned right now, as pretty positive, but also unfortunately unclear at the moment. And so that's where, like I'm saying, markets are likely to go up. But if this confusion manifests as there not being clarity and a victor, we might see a sudden shock in markets in which they drop anywhere from like 5 to 15% in the month of November is possible.
So
But if
astrologically,
things
there's possibility for that.
say again.
Astrologically, there is a possibility for that.
Yeah, there is a possibility for that if people respond to the fact that America hasn't decided yet in that way. See, the good news is that again, so Mars is in Leo now. If it were in Cancer in detriment, that would be one thing. Again, I don't like the Mars Pluto opposition. I'm not a fan of that. No astrologer is. But the fact that there's a trine to the ascendant and Venus is in the ascendant gives me a better feeling for the actual homeland itself versus than if Mars were in Cancer right now. I think that would be more problematic.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for putting people's minds at ease, giving hope, because some people getting ready for
Yeah,
scary events.
that's my perspective. I could be wrong, but that's how I'm seeing the charts. I would also be more concerned too if the Aries Libra axis was activated the way it has been for the past 18 months, but that's just not where we are in this timeline. So, yeah.
Thank you, Simon. Do you have more things to say, or
Oh, not much more. I'll just give some technical stuff like so if we do get that big kind of shock, we could see Bitcoin at like $60,000, which would be pretty low, but so if we did again see this kind of shock or pull down on for the like I call them my the finance nerds who actually know more about the economy that watch my stuff. Janet Yellen is the United States Secretary Treasury. A lot of people pay attention to, oh, what's the Federal Reserve going to do? Are they cutting rates? This, that. This woman really runs the show. So she has like $700 billion to spend between now and the first quarter. And that money, she spends it so that it goes into markets, essentially. That's how that Ponzi scheme works. That money has a lag, though. And so that's going to end up pushing stocks higher, which is then, with a further lag, going to lead to inflation, which is another thing I tend to talk about in these videos. I've said it many times. Neptune in Aries is inflationary. Okay. So that's going to kick off
more than now?
April 8th. More than now, people. More
And
than
it
now.
hasn't even gone into Aries. Neptune goes there in March, April, the
We
beginning of.
haven't seen anything in terms of inflation, unfortunately. So, which is
Well,
why this
well,
this is why the importance of understanding what's happening in the economy and owning assets is so important, which goes back to what we were talking about earlier with social unrest. Because there are people that aren't watching this. They don't know what I'm talking about. They don't know that money is just going to push the price of everything higher. And they're going to end up on the streets pissed off at some point because the squeeze is just going to be too much. Eventually, the wealth gap is going to force people to revolt.
is that
But until
is that
then,
why
you have me
last
to help
time
you out.
Neptune? Sorry, oh, was
Go
that
ahead.
why last time Neptune was at 0 degree Aries in 18, or was it 17, 18 something? That's when the Revolutionary Wars exploded.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're coming on to that, but that's next year.
And Neptune is going to be in Aries for a long time. And so that has a lot to do with the fact that, like I mentioned, those years of 2032, 2033 being a transitionary phase. Part of why that's in play has to do with Neptune being in Aries and also meeting with Saturn and other things we'll talk about in other videos.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, Neptune in Aries is inflationary for sure. Absolutely. And so, again, all this money that's being printed now as a result of rate cuts first will push asset prices higher, and then the cost of living will get higher to follow, and then they'll pull the brakes on that, and then they'll stop cutting rates, and then we'll go into another bear market. But, I cover that in my reports, and I'll talk about that more next year as that story unfolds, but in the short term, yeah, the inflation story is only going to continue to creep up higher from here. So again, these things are good to know. Do your shopping, get positioned in whatever stocks or assets make sense for your portfolio. The US economy is fine, more money is entering the system, and eventually that will be an inflation problem next year. So to summarize, November should be an up month if the election is smooth. If it doesn't, we might see a sharp move in the middle of the month. If things do go smoothly, we might see then a dip or a pullback after Venus has left Capricorn in the middle of December after the 7th or so. Whatever scenario we get, I'm buying. I'm not giving you financial advice. because I'm not fighting Janet Yellen and all her money. And I intend for my clients and I to be on the right side of that wave of money. And I expect to see the markets generally higher to end the year to start Q1 of 2025. So if you want to profit off of the cryptocurrencies, most likely to suck up some of those billions, and you're an experienced crypto investor, go to Lada's site or my website, thefinancialastrologer.com, to get my 2025 crypto report. My 2025 report for the traditional markets that covers ETFs, metals, stocks will be coming out soon. I'll have a release date for that. Also be back in the channel next month to talk about career and finances in 2025 during the marathon for all 12 signs. Should be fun, informative, and actionable to help you plan your year. So I'll see you guys then.
Thank
That's
you,
it.
Sam. I'm looking forward to having on the 2025 marathon.